Hi everybody. I'm sorry that I couldn't be with you guys today. As I mentioned yesterday, I am at a math conference all day. So what I did was what I've done with you guys in the past. I put together a little practice review worksheet that I'm going to guide us through, but it is also going to stop a couple of times to ask you a couple of questions to see how well you guys have been following along and understanding the material that we've been working on. So there's definitely a lot of good review in here and some practice problems as well. So just do your best and work together to try to figure out the correct answers. So just to start off, let's talk about a few definitions. So the first thing that I talked to you guys about was something called a single payment loan, because there are multiple different types of loans. So this is the first one that we started talking about. And this is when you pay back a loan in one single payment. So one payment. That's why it's called a single payment. It's single means one, so one time. As opposed to an installment loan, which is when you pay back a loan in multiple payments over a specified period of time. So it might be that you're paying it back every month, so little by little. Maybe it's not every month, maybe it's every couple of months. Whatever it is, you're not paying it all back at one time. You have multiple times that you get to pay it back. Something that we also only spoke about a little bit, it was actually in the video from yesterday, but I wanted to kind of just review with you, what are the qualifications in order to get a loan? So unfortunately, not everybody can get a loan. There's a couple of things that have to be checked off before we do so. So the number one thing is that we have to make sure that we're at least 18 years old, right? Same thing as a credit card. We also want to make sure that we have a steady income, meaning that we have a good job and that we can afford to borrow money. And last but not least, we must have a checking and savings account. Okay, so when we open up our bank account for the first time, we typically will open up two types of accounts, the checking and the savings, both of which that we went over, in the past. All right, another thing that we did talk about was the different types of loans that we could have. So the first one, which is one that we spent a whole unit on, is credit cards. So credit cards are absolutely a type of loan, because every time you spend it, or every time you use it to spend money on something, you're borrowing money from the bank. All right, besides credit cards, we also know that we could have, student loans, which is what we use when we're trying to pay for college, because we know college is pretty pricey. The other types of loans we might have is an auto loan. Auto is referring to cars. That's a popular one. And then the last one, which is a property loan, or what we like to call a mortgage, meaning it's money that you take out for a house. So anything that's important and that a lot of people need, but unfortunately it can be quite expensive, are reasons and things that we might need a loan for. So these are definitely some of the bigger and more popular ones. Alrighty, now moving on to some of the math. So the first thing that we've talked about that you have to calculate is something called the maturity value. So I want you to remember that when you borrow a loan, so let's say you need $1,000, you have to borrow $1,000. Unfortunately, when you pay that loan back, you're not just going to be paying back $1,000, because when you want to take out a loan, you actually have to pay to borrow the money. Okay, so what that is called when you're paying to borrow is something called the interest. So what the maturity value is, it's the total amount that you must repay. So if we use that example that I was just talking about, $1,000, that's the principal, right? So that's the principal, which of course you have to pay back, but you also have to pay the interest. So when we calculate our maturity value, we're finding the total, and you guys know the word total means add. We are adding principal with interest. Okay, But here's the tricky part, is that when we solve these problems, we might not know the interest. They might not give it to us. So before we can do that addition and before we can add, we usually have to find the interest first. So hopefully you guys remember this is a two-step process. We start by calculating the interest, and then we move on to adding the interest with the principal to get our maturity value. Okay, so these are our two steps. All right, so let's do some practice, and I know you guys know how to do this. So let's take a look. So number one, we have Lucy, and her bank granted her a single payment loan of $5,000 for 100 days at 6.5% exact interest. A lot of information there, all very important. What is the maturity value of the loan? So here's that word again, maturity value, which is the total amount we're repaying. And we know that it's not just the principal, but it's also the interest. So we're starting by calculating the interest. So in order to find the interest, we have to take P, multiply it by R, and multiply it by T. So the principal in this problem is going to be whatever you're borrowing. So in this case, Lucy is borrowing $5,000. Then we're going to multiply it with the rate. The rate in this problem is 6.5%. But you guys know that we cannot leave it as a percent. We have to take that decimal that they give us and we have to move it over once and twice and of course fill in a zero. So we have 0.065. Okay, and last but not least, our T for either time or term, it's how long Lucy gets this loan for. And they tell us that in the problem is 100 days. But unfortunately, we can't just write 100 here. They want us to write it as a fraction. 100 over, 100 over something. Okay, so what is that something? There's something in this problem that they give us that's very important. That's the type of interest, the exact interest. Exact interest means we use a specific number, and that number happens to be 365, because remember there are exactly 365 days in a year. Okay, but before I could put this in my calculator, I don't like fractions, so we have to get rid of this fraction. So in order to do that, we have to take the top number, which is 100, and divide it by the bottom number, which is 365. So let's go to our calculator and see what that gives us. All right, 100. Oh, sorry, my thing is getting a little slow here. 100 divided by 365. Okay, we got a very long number here. So I'm just going to write down the first three. 0.273. Oh, sorry. Okay, and let's take a look. We're looking for the 100th place. So the number in the 100th place is 7. We look at the next door neighbor, which is a 3. That tells us that we keep it the same. We let it rest. So that 7 is not going to go up. It's going to stay. And we don't need the 3 anymore. The 3 is goodbye. The next door neighbor, we don't really like the next door neighbor. So we're going to leave the next door neighbor alone. Okay, let's write this a little bit neater. So I equals 5,000 times 0.065 times 0.27. All right, so we're going to go over to our calculator now, and we're going to see what this gives us. So 5,000 times 0.065 times 0.27 equals, here we go, $87.75. So that is my interest. Okay, next up is our step 2, and I even gave you the formula. Take the principal and add the interest to it. So we already know the principal. They gave it to us in the problem. It's 5,000. That's how much he's borrowing. But we know that it's not just going to be 5,000 he owes back. He also includes this interest, which is $87.75. So altogether, that's going to come to $5,087.75. Okay, and that's how we solve it. That is our maturity value. So at the very end of this, after 100 days has passed, Lucy is going to pay her bank this much money. Okay? All right. Let's go to number 2. We're going to do just one more of these. So we have Alexander, and he's borrowing $3,200 for 92 days at an ordinary interest rate of 8%. All right, so we're going to start the same way. We start with our P, then our R, and then our T. So our principal is going to be $3,200. That's how much he's borrowing. The rate is a percent, so it's 8%, but we got to take that 8, pretend that there's an imaginary decimal behind it, and move it over once and twice, and of course fill in a 0. And then multiply it by the time. How many days? 92. So 92 over what? Well, look for that keyword that I told you is very important. What kind of interest is this? Ordinary. So that means we have to divide by 360. I'm going to turn this fraction into a decimal. So I'm taking the number on top, divided by the number on the bottom. All right, let's see what that is. 97 divided by 360 equals, another long number, 0.269. We do have to round this. I'm going to round to the nearest hundredth. So the number in the hundredth place is 6. The next door neighbor is 9. So because it's a 9, that 6 has to go up. And we'll ditch the next door neighbor. Let's just write this a little neater. So we have 3,200 times 0.08 times 0.27. All right, I'm going to go over to my calculator now. And I'm going to take that 3,200, multiply it by 0.08, multiply it with 0.27, and our final answer, 69.12. So there we go. That's our interest, which we need for step 2, because we have to take that original principal, that 3,200, and add it with our principal, with our interest, which is 69.12. So our final answer is going to be $3,269.12. That is our maturity value. Okay, last but not least, the last thing that we talked about is installment loans. So this is the type where you pay over, a couple of months or whatever it is to slowly pay it back. In order to do that, there are 2 things that we need. So what we need is the amount, so whatever it is that we're borrowing, however much that is, but we also need to know the down payment. Okay. And I was talking to you guys yesterday about this, and I said, unfortunately, we might not always be given the down payment, which means we have to find it. And I told you guys I want you to memorize 2 things. What the operation is in step 1, and then what the operation is in step 2. So the operation in step 1 was to multiply. We're going to multiply the amount by whatever the percent is. So if I put a 20% down payment or a 15%, so we got to multiply first. Then to find the amount financed, all we do is take the amount again, and we subtract by the down payment. All right, let's see if we have time to squeeze in one more practice of this. So we have Daniel, who purchased a new computer for $1,329 by taking advantage of the store's installment credit plan. If he made a 25% down payment and financed the remainder, what is the amount she financed? Okay, so I gave you the steps. I told you multiply first and then subtract. So if we go back up here, it tells us what to multiply. It tells us to take the amount. So what is the amount? How much is the computer? 1,329. Multiply it by the percent, but we never can leave something as a percent. So we're going to take the percent, which is 25, and we're going to turn that into a decimal. So we're going to move it over once, twice, so it's 0.25. All right, so let's get our answer for step 1. Calculator. So we have 1,329, and we're going to multiply 0.25. So our answer here is $332.25. So that's step 1. Let's move this out of the way. Let's put our answer down. So that's an important number. This number represents our down payment. This is how much he put down to get this started. He's going to pay a part of this already. Step 2, we subtract, and once again we take the amount, same amount as before, 1,329, but this time we're going to subtract the down payment, which is $332.25. Once we subtract, we are done. So let's just go to our calculator. Oh, sorry. We're going to take 1,329, subtract $332.25, and this is what our final answer comes to. $996.75. So you know what? I'm not even going to put a box around this, even though it's important. It's not our answer. Our answer is this, because we were looking for how much is getting financed. So Daniel paid this amount. He said, all right, I'm going to put some money down. Here you go. I'm going to pay a part of this. So he paid $332.25, but there's still more left over. That's not all of it. So he still owes $996.75, which he is going to pay, but he's going to pay slowly over time because it's too much for him right now. Okay? All right, guys. So that is everything. We learned a lot this week. This was a really good review and practice mix of everything. Some of the math is going to get a little bit more complicated. We're going to keep growing. We're just going to do the best we can with it. You guys are doing an awesome job. So I'm going to let you go, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.